Hi, in this video we will learn about how to create tasks while using Firebase database. This time we will be not using Firebase Firestore because we already covered that in the previous videos how Firebase Firestore worked with the collection with the documents and how the data store inside the document. Now let's just focus on this time Firebase database. So we will be using task as a terminology to create a task, to read task, to update task, to delete task. So the first thing is to create a task. So yeah, let's just get started and jump into the coding. I have created a new branch which is called feature create task. So I will be doing that code in this branch. Then I will upload that branch to the GitHub and will merge to the master branch. If you notice in the task directory, I have already a fragment which is called task listing fragment. This time I will be creating another fragment which will be called create task fragment. That will be bottom sheet dialog fragment. Now let's just create that one. So I already wrote a code to save the time. So let me just explain what I wrote in that class. Create task is a fragment which is extended from the bottom sheet dialog fragment. Inside that I am using binding. Now I have another variable which is called close function which store a lambda function. Currently I assign null. Now on create view I am assigning binding variable with the layout. And view created, it's empty because we haven't yet created any listener or any logic in that method. Then below that we have another function which is called set dismiss listener. So I am passing that lambda function and storing in the close function variable. And why I am using that, by the time of dismissing listener, so if I want to pass any of the data with the help of this lambda function, I can pass data to the fragment where the bottom sheet is showing. So that was the purpose of using this lambda function which store in the close function variable. Now in that class we have another function which is called onCreateDialog. So on create dialog we are setting a listener set on show listener which gave us a dialog interface, and that passed to the setup bottom sheet. From this dialog interface I am getting the bottom sheet dialog, and then I am just finding a view of ID design bottom sheet. So this view we will set the background as a transparent. If we don't set the transparent background, we will see a white shades around the corner. So that was the reason we use these two functions. On create dialog which gave us the dialog interface, and the set bottom sheet gave us a view which set the background color as a transparent. Now on the function set dismiss listener, I am passing a lambda function with having no parameter. So that function will store in the close function variable. Now coming to the XML layout. Now as you can see in XML layout we have parent layout which is called constraint layout. Inside parent we have image view which refer to cancel button. Then we have title which is actually a text view. So that will give us a title named create task. Then we have text input layout. Then I am using two extra more attribute which is called counter enable true and counter maximum length 255. So that will give us a counter which will restrict this character to 255 character. So if user can't exceed a message to type above 255 characters. Then inside text input layout we have text input edit text view, and for the safety measure I also added extra other attribute which is maximum length 255. So it will never allow to type any text which exceeds from the limit, like the limit is 255. So that is pretty much regarding to that. The style attribute, I am using a custom style which is exist in the theme.xml which is extended from material component.text input layout.outline box. So which will give us, like, let me show you in the emulator, when user click on the edit box, when it's focused the hand will move to the top section. So that parent theme layout will give us this design. Now if you notice we have borderline, also the hand text color as well. Now coming back to the theme.xml file, so I extended that custom text input layout style from the widget material component text input layout and outline box. So we have three attributes: box stroke color, box stroke width, and hint text color. So these settings we can change from there, and we can use this style in any of the text input layout throughout the project. So that will help us like to not have a redundant code for every text input layout which we are using. So that is a good practice to keep that styling in the theme.xml file. Now coming back to the fragment create task XML file, we have a button which is called material button with having text done. So that button will be responsible to create a task or to trigger a function which will be exist in the view model. Then along with the material button we have progress bar and also a view which is placed on the bottom side, and that view will help us to keep the distance the button from the bottom edge. So that is pretty much regarding to XML file. Now I will run the application and to see if it's working or not. I open emulator and I'm clicking on the cancel button, but it's not working. Seems like the cancel button have some issue. I just go back to the create task fragment and see there the listener is not attached. So I just attach the listener and then call this.dismiss. Then I run the application. During running application, let's just go through the files like we have in the comment section. So let's just check out what's changed in the task listing fragment. So I just click on it in the task listing fragment through VCS. I just get to know that we just added a listener to the button. So this listener will show us that bottom sheet dialog fragment like which we created for create a task. If you see that the code is inside in the click listener. Now coming to a theme.xml file, there we have just added a theme for text input layout. Now our application is running. So I just click on the task tab, add a new task, a bottom sheet will open. This time the border color and hint text color is changed. That because we have changed from the theme.xml, there we placed a custom theme. Now we'll click on the cancel button if that is working or not. Yes, it's working because we fixed that listener. Now we need to create a backend setup for this UI to connect with that. For this I have created a list of points which we will be going through like in the MVVM architecture while using Firebase database. Now coming to the list of points which we created, first is add dependency, create task, view model, then task repository, then fifth one Firebase module, then sixth one repository module. So these steps will be going through. Coming to the first step, so I just get the Firebase database dependency from the official Firebase documentation. As you can see the link I highlighted in the search bar. So I copy that dependency and then add it in the build.gradle file, and I just synced the Gradle and it's added that dependency in the project. Now coming to the second step, which is about create a data class. So we created a data class with having different parameters like ID, user ID, description and date. So that is regarding to the second step. Now we'll be coming to the third step, which is about create a ViewModel class. So I already created a ViewModel class which is named task ViewModel. Inside ViewModel I have one mutable live data and live data. So mutable live data which is private, and name it as a add task with having UI state, and pair which is about task and string. As the task created, so it will return the created task and also a string which indicate a message. Then we have a function which is called add task and it accepts task parameter. Now coming to the fourth step, which is about task repository. Task repository is an interface class with having one method which is called add task and it accepts two parameters, task, and one is lambda function which gave us UI state with a pair of task and string. So that is regarding to the task repository. Now coming to the implementation part. So in the task repository implementation we have function add task which perform operation to create task to the Firebase database. So I will explain a bit later after going to the fifth and sixth step, because that is necessary to understand first these two steps. So I will going to the Firebase module. Inside that I have function provide Firebase database. So it will give us Firebase database instance because which is dependency for the task repository. So for that purpose we need to have that dependency first before creating a task repository. Coming to the repository module, inside the repository module I have function provide task repository. So it will return the task repository, but this time I guess we made a mistake, so I just fixed that with replace task repository. Now, if you notice in the task repository implementation, we are passing the Firebase database as a dependency, and it requires because to add a task to the Firebase database. Now, coming to this function, as I said, I will explain a bit later. Now it's time to explain a better now. So add task, which gave us a task parameter, and one is the lambda function, which is a UI state pair of task as string. Now database reference child, and there is another object class I created for that. So it will report to a node or table. You can say that in that way, like task is our node or parent node, or you can refer to a table. So after child, I am calling another function which is called push. What actually push does? Push, when we are calling push, it gave us a unique ID for the entry. Whenever we call that function, it gave us a unique ID for every entry we want to have that. So that ID is actually required for that to add as a task ID. If you notice, the task ID initially it was empty, and I assigned that ID to the task ID. Now reference.child using unique ID, then below that calling a function set value, and we are setting the object which we passed as a task. Then attaching two different listener, one is add on success listener and one is add on failure listener. That is basically the same as we were using for the Firebase Firestore. Now if you notice inside these listener, I am invoking a lambda function with different state, like if add on success, if you notice UI state.success is triggering, on failure UI state.failure. That is pretty much regarding to the task repository implementation. Now the next part is to observe the live data which we have inside in the ViewModel in the fragment class. So if the operation is happening from the repository, from this live data in the observer, we will be getting based on the state which we are getting from the repository. So in the observer we have three different states: loading, failure and success. Now coming to the done function, I am checking first the validation. If the task detail is not empty, to make sure that it's filled with any of the text. So when it's true, that means the task detail has some text. So that part validation passed. Calling a function add task which require a task object. If you see in the task we have different parameters. ID initially empty, but we filled that in the repository with the unique key, like as I explained earlier. Now coming back to that to get task function. So in description I am putting the task detail, and the date I am assigning the date object. Then also in apply, which is a scope function, so in that I am getting a session to get the user ID and assigning that user ID to the user underscore ID variable. Now I also added two different view models: view model which is task view model and auth view model which is auth view model. So that is pretty much regarding to this fragment. If we see in this fragment, we have function which is observer, and we have another function which gave us get task, and we have another function validation. Let's just remove the unnecessary imports. So I guess we are done with that class. Now let's just run the application to see if it's working or not. As the application is running, if you can see the main screen. Now switch to the task tab. I click on the add new task. Bottom sheet is appearing. Now I also open the run tab as well to check the logs as well. So I added some text, then I remove some text to see the validation part if it's working. Now it's working. I added some text, click on the done. Progress bar is showing. Now let's just wait. In the meantime, I notice there is an error coming from the Firebase database. Connection was forcefully killed by the server. Will not attempt to reconnect. Reason: Firebase error. So I just thought that I might not connect it to the internet, but our internet connection is established correctly. Then the second thought I came to, that the database is not created. So I just go to the Firebase console, click on the create database and select any of the server. Like first I select the location US Central. Now we have the rules. So currently I just click on the test mode, and later on we will modify the rules in detail. Let's just wait for creating the database on the Firebase console. It will take a little bit time. Now our database is created. Initially there is no data exists, that's why we are not seeing anything on that database. Coming to the rules, so the rule is just allowing for the some specific date. Now I will go back to the emulator and to see if it's working again or not. I added some text, click on the done button and clear the logs as well. This time I am waiting, but the same error is showing again. So I just thought this might be some other issue, but later on I come to know that as I created the Firebase database so we did not update the Google JSON service file. Whenever you created a Firebase database file or any Firestore, then you make sure that you have updated Google JSON service file. So I just downloaded that and I'll write the previous with the new one. So in that file, if you notice, like with the help of version control system, there is one line which is highlighted, Firebase URL with referring to that Firebase database. So that was the reason it was not working. So make sure like every time you created or doing some operation, your Google service.json file is up to date. Otherwise it will put you in trouble situation and it will give you a headache part and maybe giving hours of debugging. But remember that thing very well. So it's time to again testing our application if the task is creating on the Firebase database or not. So I just rerun the application to see if it's working. Our application is running. Let's just wait to appear the main screen. Now switch to the task. Again add a new task, add some text, click on the done function. Nothing just happened. It's actually created a task, but the thing is we did not show any toast message because our progress bar just hide, but the task is successfully created on the Firebase database. In order to fix that, I just go to the create task fragment. In the UI state.success, only the progress bar is hiding, but this time I added a toast message state.data. Remember the data is a pair object, so in the second we are just getting the message. Now I also dismissing the dialog bottom sheet as well. Now let's just run the application and to see if it's working or not. Add a text. Hi, add me as a task. Now click on the done and let's just wait. Yeah, we just did it. The task has been created successfully. So our code is now working fine. Now let's just check on the Firebase database as well to see if that is existing or not. Our task is existing now. I just click on the button to expand. Now click expand the child as well. But again there is more problem in the data. If you notice, data field is empty and also the ID is duplicating, like the parent ID, then inside the child ID is both actually same. That's mean like a packet inside same packet, then in the same packet inside data. So we need to fix that. Like in the code, I just removed the whole data from the Firebase database and go back to the repository class, like the task repository implementation and the function add task. So I'm checking the code, like what's going wrong in that code. I check that, then the reference.child I'm using unique key again. But if you notice, like we are using push method, so it's actually appending like that path or key with the reference as well. So we don't need to add as a child again the same unique key. So after fixing that, remember we have another problem. The date field is storing empty. So I go back to the create task fragment, and this time I'm using simple date format to format the date object into the text. So this time I change the date to the string and also assigned with the empty string as well. So we fix that as well. So this time run the application and to see if it's working. I hope this time it will work. Our application is running now. Switch to the task, add me as a task. our task is created successfully. I go to the Firebase database, and now our data is storing correctly and with having correct data. If you notice, this data is stored in the key value pair data structure, like that is the key and 19 July 2022 is like the value. We will explore more Firebase database, like how the data structure is implemented in the Firebase database and how it's implemented in the Firebase Firestore. So that is pretty much regarding in this video. If you think my content is adding value to your learning or helping you in your coding career, please subscribe to my YouTube channel for latest more videos, and I will be appreciated if you recommend this channel to your friends as well. Thank you for your support and watching my tutorials.